how do you define money? How do you answer the question, what is money?
The way I define money is that it is a technology used to store human time and energy. That would be how I would define money. And the reason I define it that way is because God made us in his image, and he's given us two finite things, time and energy. Those are the scarcest assets we have. And the thing with time and energy is you don't know how much you have. That's the problem. God doesn't tell you, okay, you have X amount of time. It's just, you have what you have. Once it's gone, it's gone. How do you spend that time and energy? What are you storing that time and energy in? Money. What technology are you using to store your actually most precious commodities, time and energy? What are you using to store that in? That's money. And whatever you use to store it in is your money.
Amazing. I think you said something about on your Twitter profile about how this allows us to glorify God by like actually which money we're choosing to store our time and energy in, that it either inhibits or enhances our ability to glorify God. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, because God made us to expand the borders of Eden, right? That's what he said. He said, go, be fruitful and multiply. Makes them in his image, man and woman. Then he says, go and be fruitful and multiply. What that implies is that Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden, and God says, okay, I've made a little garden for you. I want you to go and expand it to cover the whole earth. That's your job now. You have a big job. I've given you everything you need to do the job. This is your job. Multiply imagers, multiply the garden. That's what you got to do. How else do you do that but with money? Money is the tool we use, the technology we use to peacefully collaborate in our purpose for living, right? Money is the tool we use to collaborate to fulfill our very purpose, to expand Eden. So that glorifies God because God made you to do that. And when you store your time and energy in a money that is fundamentally ungodly, that rebels against God's standards, that does not glorify God because it doesn't efficiently fulfill your mandate, what God made you to do and to be. Which is why we see, like the guys like Dr. Seyfedin Ammous writes his book, The Fiat Standard, and Jimmy Song wrote a book now called Fiat Ruins Everything. And these men are showing us very skillfully how, when the money's corrupted, everything else seems to get corrupted along with it. So that does not glorify God when his imagers are hurting each other, being violent, being, perverse, and not expanding Eden, but instead expanding hell. So this really goes quite deep and is very spiritual and moral. And so once your mind gets open to this, and I hope the church can see this and receive this, because I really think it will help us to accelerate the growth of God's kingdom on earth. That's really why I'm in Bitcoin, is because I've realized what money is, and we need to have a good and moral money if we want to see humanity flourish.
I want to talk about Proverbs 16:11, which perhaps you can tell us what that's about. I think it has to do with just weights and measures. And, many Bitcoiners talk about this in relation to Bitcoin, right? It being kind of the first, we have standardized units of measurement that help us coordinate and collaborate at scale, like the kilometer, or the second, the hour, or the inch, whatever the mile. Yet in the sphere of money, we've never had that, right? Gold was kind of the approximate standard unit of measure. Fiat is obviously a highly non-standard unit of measure, considering that its supply is completely unpredictable, changing all the time, and unauditable. So what does the Bible have to say about just weights and measures, and how does this pertain to money?
Yeah, fiat money is like a tape measure that changes its measurements every few months. Yeah. Right? Try building a house when the inch keeps changing. Right. It's a disaster. Right. So when it comes to this passage, actually, Proverbs 16:11 is like the main passage in my book I use to compare fiat and Bitcoin. It's like, okay, so here's God's standard, a just measure, an equal standard, and so forth. Which monetary network fits into this standard best, fiat or Bitcoin? That's sort of the rubric I've used in the book. This passage can be used to describe a lot of different things. So it's used as a metaphor to encourage people to be honest and just in courts. So, right, it's a metaphor where it's like, look, judge righteously, judge with a fair measure. Don't be partial and so forth. But the literal understanding of it comes from money, where you would weigh the money on a literal scale. And God commanded the people in Deuteronomy, he says, you must use a just and equal measure and standard. Because what would happen was people would manipulate the scale. right? If they were selling, they would make one side, would it be lighter or heavier? Anyways, they would manipulate it
in their own favor.
Put a little weight underneath, nobody sees, so that you're basically robbing people on the margins now. Right. You're selling for more, you're buying for less, and nobody knows you're doing it.
Right.
So that's where it comes from. And fiat money does this in a tremendously wide array of ways, whether it's like just straight up taxation, whether it's a more subtle, sneaky inflationary taxation. Fiat money is just robbing you everywhere. You work, you get robbed. You buy something, you get robbed. You want to use energy, you get robbed. You die, you get robbed.
You say everywhere. You get robbed.
Right. It's literally just theft on every single economic thing you want to do. Mm-hmm. And not only that, it's just constantly expanding. Robert Kiyosaki said something that was just profound in its simplicity. Why would you save something someone else can print?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's as simple as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the principle. Bitcoin is, I think, the first monetary standard we've ever had that is actually a perfectly fair and just weight. Mm-hmm. Because there's only 21 million units of Bitcoin. Well, 21 quadrillion sats. However you want to say it, there's a finite amount of units of Bitcoin. That's all you have. So now you can use this measuring stick to measure anything. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be the same no matter what. Right? Nobody has a 22 million Bitcoin long measuring tape. Mm-hmm. We all have the same 21 million Bitcoin measuring tape to measure economic value. Mm-hmm. It seems like this is a common sense. This is how you would want to measure economic value because it's fair and equal, and everybody can figure it out. You don't need to you don't need to gamble in the stock market. You don't need to try to beat inflation. All you have to do is just add value and earn Bitcoin, and now you have a share of the value. Mm-hmm. And this is equal and fair and just and good and godly. Mm-hmm. So, people will say things online like, as my tweets blow up, the ones that blow up, I always get these people, oh, look at this grifter. He's here to sell Bitcoin. Bro, I've never sold a Bitcoin in my life. I don't plan on it. But why don't we want an equal and just standard? I don't get it. People are just so used to being robbed. Is it like a Stockholm syndrome? Have you done any interviews with any people that might give you some insight into why humans want to be robbed?
Yeah, definitely not. I do get some fiat maxis, you might call them, which are basically statist, and they're just saying this is the way it is, and not necessarily morally or ethically justifying it, just they have a belief that that's the way it is and the way it always will be. Mm-hmm. And I want to say something too for the economic purist out there, that we're not technically measuring value. Prices are an appraisal, like a social appraisal of value. You can't actually measure value because value is subjective, but I think the analogy still is very useful. I think I got this secondhand from Wittgenstein through Taleb, but he says if you use a ruler to measure a table, but you can't trust the ruler, you don't know whether you're measuring the ruler or the table. Mm. Like you need a fixed frame of reference that is consistent across time to make accurate and useful and comparable measurements. And we just simply don't have that in the sphere of money at all before Bitcoin. So it's a really, really big deal.